Every day in our departments across the province, we face a constantly changing government environment that imposes new demands and rapidly shifting priorities upon us. How can we possibly succeed in this environment? How can we cope with this stress, energize ourselves, while at the same time providing a wow experience to the public, their families, and to ourselves? MBayer is the president of the Lean Consulting Group. He has been dubbed the Dean of Lean. He teaches organizations the living, breathing, essential processes that build successful, self-sustaining, healthy corporate cultures despite the challenges and stresses they constantly face. Michael's many years working in government, industry, and in private practice have taught him the essential element in battle against stress is a healthy sense of humor and a mood of playfulness. Today, we will gain an understanding of stress and some specific actions we can take to combat the effects of stress. Michael will teach us what humor in the workplace really means and how to use it to combat stress in the workplace. Please help me welcome Michael and celebrating stress, reclaiming the gift of humor.
Thank you very much. It is great to be back at Brown Bag Lunch. Yeah, my year is just not complete if I don't come. If I don't hear from Sharon, I get nervous, right? So it's great to be here. So we're talking today about stress. I thought, what's a good way to describe stress? What is stress like? How does it get going in our body? Well, it's like a balloon, right? And slowly, and things happen, and then slowly, and things happen, and slowly, and then things happen, and we get full of all this stress and all the symptoms of stress, and then what happens? I'll step back, so please feel safe. So what happens is that all these different forces come together, and they're constantly poking. If we're not careful, then that's exactly what happens. But let's look at that again. Stress starts, and it starts to build, and it starts to build, and it starts to build. Now, what happens despite all of this stress? That we know what we could do, that we know some ideas to combat stress. And what about if we're able to combat stress? Oh, I'm going to make sure this is the tricky part. There we go. We don't explode, but we manage stress. We manage stress, we do the things we have to do, and it goes away. All right. So let's talk a little bit about stress and what really is stress. So what's causing the stress in our lives? What's causing the stress in your lives? Now, I know you all work for the province. I never worked for the province, but just to give you a little history, I worked for the feds until I got laid off. My wife worked for the province until they got transferred somewhere else. And my kids worked for the city until they finally graduated from university and got jobs somewhere else. So I get the idea of stress at all different levels of government. So what is causing us stress? Change causes us a lot of stress. And I think in terms of what you folks do and just the nature of who you are, there's a tremendous amount of stress. Why? Because you're at the whims of a government. Every 4 years, technically, down on Broadway, there could be new people in those offices. And when there's new people in the offices, there's new programs, new processes, new things that happen that we have to adjust to every single day. People can cause us stress. And it's the interactions with people. There are some people, like the needle, who will constantly poke us. But there are people that can cause us stress. How do we deal with those people? We sometimes have to worry about job security. Because what's going to happen? Are we going to get downsized? And certainly, for some of the folks dealing, especially in the Department of Health, the folks that deal in the ICUs in Winnipeg, the critical care units with consolidation, you worry about these things. That can cause stress. And finally, it's perceptions. Because sometimes maybe really it doesn't exist, but maybe it's something that we're doing to ourselves that's causing that stress, and the stress is self-induced. Now, one of my clients had this on a board. I don't recommend you use this as a stress relieving technique. Bang head here. Placed on firm surface, follow directions. Repeat step 2 is necessary. If unconscious, please reduce stress reduction activity. So first we have to understand what stress is all about. And stress is the response of the body by any demand placed on it. It can be either psychological or physiological. Sometimes stress is described as that feeling you have with the person in front of you. You just want to put your hands around their throat and squeeze hard until their tongue sticks out and it's blue. But of course, we can't do that. But not only is it psychological or physiological, there are 2 types of stress. There is good stress, believe it or not, and there's bad stress. So what's good stress? Good stress is the stress that we experience all the time. Good stress is the kind of stress that we experience when we're in school, where we want to do well. We want to get that A+. It's the kind of stress that we have every day at work, where we have a project to do, we've got deadlines, we want to do a really great job, and when the day is done and the project's done and we forward it on, we realize that we've really made our accomplishment. It's that stress that drives us to that excellence. But there's also bad stress. And it's the bad stress that we want to talk about more than the good stress, because it's the bad stress that can really hurt us in many ways. So we have to ask ourselves, how can we combat stress using humor? And what can we do to make things better for ourselves? We have to get into new habits. The first thing we have to realize is stress is mostly self-imposed. The only person who can really make you stress, that could drive you crazy, that can make you obsessed, is the person who looks at you every single morning when you brush your teeth. So you're giving yourself permission to be stressed. So the thing that we have to do is we have to make sure we're not doing that. And that we're doing the things that we have to do. We're in the right headspace. There was a book written, Zebras Don't Get Ulcers, by, I can't read this, Robert Sapolsky. So Zebras Don't Get Ulcers. So let me give you, this is a great book. I highly recommend it. But let me give you the Reader's Digest version of why zebras don't get ulcers. Do you know why zebras don't get ulcers? Because they sit on the African plain and they're eating their lunch slowly, like many of you are doing. And they look up and they're not stressed at all. And all of a sudden they sense some danger and they see the lions coming. So what do? They take off. And they run like crazy until they have a sense that there's no more lions. And then they continue to have their lunch. So they use the flight response to stress. Sometimes it's people that cause us stress, and sometimes those people are just a bunch of clowns. And in case you're wondering, that's me. Anybody know a Larry Bailey? No? You know Larry? Okay, that's Larry right there. All right, just to let you know. Sorry, Larry, if you see the tape. But people are sometimes the cause of our stress, and it's the relationships that we have with them, the things that happen. You know, there's some people like the needle that just poke you, and that's constantly causing you stress. They're trying to get you to react. But we have to understand that we can learn a lot from the quintessential children's toy, a box of crayons. Because some crayons are sharp. Some crayons are pretty. Some are dull. Some have weird names. They're all different colors, but they all have to learn to live in the same box. And that's what we have to do. We have to learn to get along with each other. We have to learn to appreciate each other. We have to learn to appreciate differences to alleviate the stress that we're imposing upon ourselves. That great author, Anonymous, wrote, 6 + 3 = 9, but so does 5 + 4 and 8 + 1. Just because someone views or lives life differently to the way you do doesn't mean that you can judge them. Let's learn to respect and to trust one another. Because maybe what we need to do is change our attitude. Because maybe that's the problem. It's what's between our ears that's driving us and giving us stress. Now, folks, you have to realize that if you view coming to work as your punishment for not marrying rich, you probably have an attitude problem, all right? Because coming to work is not a punishment. Are there any managers in the room? Managers, supervisors, directors? There's a few of you. So here I've got a piece of advice for you. Managers without a sense of humor are like lawnmowers in a cemetery. They both have lots of people below them, but nobody's paying attention. So what's the manager's role here in helping to reduce stress in the workplace? And for the managers in the room, you have a key role to play. Because it's the tone that a manager sets in the workplace that allows us to have a workplace that's engaging and fun and productive, or one that isn't. And that idea of, we all have to realize, as civil servants, you do extremely important work, each and every one of you. And we never want to take that away from you. So where we get into trouble is when we take ourselves too seriously. We have to take what we do very seriously. But when we take ourselves too seriously, that's when we run into trouble. So you have to have a sense of fun, a sense of lightness in your organization in order to really be effective. Do you think that I have a sense of fun and playfulness? Anybody notice my socks? It sends a message, right? That I'm willing to have a little fun, I'm willing to lighten up. We've got to take what we do very seriously. Studies have shown that organizations where people take their work very seriously, but they take themselves with a grain of salt and they have a little bit of fun, are more productive. When they're dealing with problems and issues, they come up with more problems that are more creative, that are easier and faster to implement, that have bigger and more positive impact. So we can't understate the role of the manager in the office. And I don't know what kind of manager the ideal manager is, but there's a couple of people that I have in my mind. There's a man I met many years ago when I was working for Transport Canada. He worked out in rural Manitoba. I'm not going to tell you his name because I don't want to embarrass him if he ever sees the tape. But I remember when I first met him, I was working for Transport Canada in telecommunications. And we were out to visit him, and the communications network that he had in his installation was so old, I'm not making this up, it was so old that the company had to get guys from retirement to fix it because they don't teach this stuff anymore. They don't even make the stuff anymore. They would take equipment out and they would cannibalize it. And they would send these guys parts that hadn't worn out yet so they could fix our equipment. So I went out and I fixed it. We installed brand new equipment. We modernized it. He was so happy. He was so grateful. He was always so nice. So Doug, thank you. I really appreciate what you're doing. Oh, it's just so wonderful. He's just such a nice guy. Eventually he got transferred. He got moved into Winnipeg, moved into my part of town. And he joined my church. So I was out one day. My wife comes back. She says, do you know so-and-so from church? I said, yeah. Why? He phoned. She said, he is such a nice man. We had such a nice talk. We had such a nice chat. And I said, what did you volunteer us for? She said, oh my God. I said, yeah, you got to learn how to say no to him. I said, he's really sneaky because he nices you to death. But as a management technique, his people would follow him and do anything for him. Why? Because of that kindness, that appreciation that he had for his staff and making sure that things got done. So in other words, it's that attitude of humor that he had that made all the difference. Why is this not working? Oh, well, so I guess we're out. All right. So, it's not going to be nearly as funny as I thought it was going to be. All right. I'm a lean expert. And one of the things that I do in lean is we bring lean processes in and we put up, I work in hospitals mostly, and we put up what we call patient experience boards. In a non-healthcare, we put customer experience boards. And I was at a client last week, and I was looking at their patient experience board, and I was talking to some of the folks. And they said, we're having real problems here. And I said, well, what kind of problems? We're having a lot of stress. There's all kinds of things that are happening here. And so they said, what we did on our patient experience board, we put a list of our staff, and we put we put a grid with the days of the month, And we said to them, you always remember the days that you were stressed and how you felt. And maybe one way to help us remember what that was like and help us to cope with what was going on is what we need to do. It's just we need to color that in to help us with our stress. And I thought, wow. Now, I'm not saying you should go in your departments and put up a staff list with a calendar and say, Mary was stressed this day and man was stressed the other day. But what you might want to do in your own personal calendars is to track that a little bit. Because sometimes that can help us when we're thinking about if we're thinking about the circumstances of why we're stressed. If we understand why we're stressed, then that can help us counteract that stress. So what's humor in the workplace really all about? That great Canadian philosopher Sparkles the Clown defined humor in the workplace as the gift of kindness that you create that makes life a little easier for those whose lives you touch. Now think about that for a minute. It's the gift of kindness you create that makes life a little easier for those whose lives you touched. So in some instances, we're talking about a belly laugh. But in some instances, we're talking about a gentle touch. And in some instances, we're just a shoulder to cry on so that people can to help people get past the things that are happening to them in their lives. So it's not about laughing, it's not about jokes, but it's truly about a gift of kindness that we give one another. And when we frame humor like that, it takes on an entirely different aspect. And there's a circle of humor. The circle of humor goes from comedy, which we all understand when we right away think of humor, to caring, the gentle touch, to compassion. And then it comes back to the whole, to comedy. Why is this important to remember? And why do we have to think about in terms not only of the humor, but of the compassion and the caring? Think about this. How many hours a week do you spend, not necessarily with the people in this room, but how many hours a week do you spend with the people at the office? A lot, right? We are a family. And one way when someone is experiencing stress, when someone just is having trouble, because we all have times in our lives when everything sort of just comes to us at once. And if we as a family, as a work family, can't help and support each other, you have to wonder, why are we even here? That really is the essence of humor. Now, there are psychological effects of humor, and it's very important that we understand what those psychological effects are. Now, when my oldest daughter was in optometry school, we got a letter from her one day, and we opened it up and said, "Dear Mom and Dad, we just wanted to let you know that despite the fire in my apartment that destroyed everything, the doctor said that the smoke inhalation was, I didn't inhale a lot of smoke, and I'm going to be okay. The nice boy who lives down the hall, whose apartment wasn't damaged, said, I can live with him as long as I want. I know you guys have always wanted to be grandparents. So in about 6 months, ... love Cheryl." P.S. There was no fire. I wasn't hurt in any way. I didn't lose anything, and I am not pregnant. But I did get a D in optics, and I barely passed my practicum, and I wanted you to put that into the proper perspective. So it's about putting things in the proper perspective, right? The psychological aspects of humor, which are so key and critical that we understand. There are physiological benefits to humor as well. And if those things really affect our body and help us relax. So some of the physiological, there's a very positive effect. We get to relax, the endorphins flow. There's some aerobic benefits in laughter. When was the last time you had a really good belly laugh? Do you know that it doesn't even have to be real? Did you know that? Do you think I can get you guys laughing? Well, let's see. Well, well, I feel better. None of you do. All right, I guess it didn't work. I'm losing my voice. Well, at least you're laughing at me, which is cool. I appreciate that. But there are huge physiological effects as well. When you laugh, the endorphins get going into your brain. Everything just seems to work out better when we have a little bit of fun. You have to understand that stress is about tightening up. I need the help of a volunteer. Do I have a brave volunteer to help me with something which I hope works? Don't all jump up at once, folks. All right, here we go. And your name is?
Neil.
Neil, great. Mind the cord. All right, so here we go. So we're going to need these two fingers sort of like this. I'm going to stick your finger in there. Okay, cool. Okay, and then this finger in there, like so. All right, so just tug like that. So try to get your fingers up, but just take your fingers apart. Take your fingers apart. Oh, you managed to get it out. But see, here, good thing we used that finger, huh? It'll be okay on tape. Anyway, behave yourself, Neil. All right. But you know, the harder we pull, the harder it just doesn't come off. Why? Because stress is tightening up. But when we relax, and it slides right off the finger, I think. Here we go. All right. There we go. I got it. Okay. Give him a round of applause.
Yeah.
You can take that home and play with it.
No, this is a cat toy.
All right. Thank you very much. All right. You also have to remember that, one way of defining laughter as well is laughter is a smile that explodes. In that joyous laugh. Now, someone was asking me earlier when I was chatting with some of you before we started, you're asking me about, let's call a spade, political correctness. And, we're living in a world today where things simply aren't tolerated anymore that should have never been tolerated in the first place. And I applaud that. But the thing we have to ask ourselves is, how can we figure out what's going on? Do you know that there's 3 very distinct types of laughter? The first type of laughter is genuine, the kind of thing that you were doing when we couldn't get the thing off Neil's finger. However, there's also a polite laugh. So we have to listen very carefully when people laugh to hear exactly what they're saying. And a polite laugh goes something like, ha ha ha. Now when you hear a ha ha ha, that should send a message to you, right? That should, and if it's after something you said, this should set off an alarm bell in your brain, all right? Because what's happening here? And again, today, I really applaud the fact that we're not tolerating the kind of stuff that we used to, and that's the right thing to do. But at one time when we were tolerating it, things would happen or people would say something, and some people would laugh genuinely because they thought it was funny, and some people would give that, So what is that saying? It's saying, I don't think you're very funny. I don't think you're very correct. It's also saying I'm scared to say something because someone might come back at recriminations, right? So we have to very carefully listen when people laugh. Is it a genuine laugh? Is it a polite laugh? Or is it a sad laugh? Because there's sad laughter too. And we have to, again, sad laughter, polite laughter, very similar. So we really have to tune in to listen to what we're hearing when people are laughing to make sure that we understand what's going on. And if you hear polite laughter, it was probably inappropriate. I won't even say probably. It is or was inappropriate. So the type of laughter we hear can be very indicative. George Lichtenberg said, a person reveals their character by nothing more clearly than what they find laughable. So if people are laughing by inappropriate jokes, what are they saying about themselves? We have to ask ourselves that. But what do you do in humor? What do you do with jokes? How do you know stuff's appropriate? How do you know if it's appropriate to tell here, or in the office, or anywhere? Well, Sparkles the Clown has a rule for humor. Here's the rule. The rule is, if you can tell your joke to your grandmother while sitting in a church, it's probably okay to tell. I've met some very raunchy grandmas, so you got to be careful. But that's the rule that I follow. Many years ago when I first started entertaining, I was Sparkles the Clown. And I was doing everything from, believe it or not, corporate work to little kid birthday parties. So you have to make a decision of what you're going to say, and you have to draw a line that you never cross. So many years ago, I drew a line I never cross. I don't judge other people, but there are jokes I won't tell and things I won't say, and I've become very disciplined. And why? Because I never have to worry about what comes out of my mouth. And that's important to me. So what are you using? What are you hearing at work? Now, there's different types of humor as well. There's light humor and dark humor. Now, for the most part, we've been talking about light humor so far, but I just want to get into the dark humor for just a bit, because I think it's important to understand what dark humor is all about. Think in terms of folks who, police, firefighters, paramedics, military, folks that deal as part of their normal, everyday work, horrors and situations that we can't even dream about. How do you cope with that psychologically without literally going crazy? And one way that they do is they engage in dark humor. And dark humor is about making fun and mocking what goes on because it's the only way that they can cope. And that's a perfectly okay coping mechanism. The only problem is if they take that out of the very tight context in which it happens, we are horrified at what we hear. So if you're involved in that kind of a thing, if you're engaged in dark humor, beware. It's healthy as long as it's not constant, and you never take it outside, because that's when you get into trouble. And usually we associate sad laughter with the dark humor, because that's that kind of sarcastic, biting laughter that you hear when people are talking about that. But it's something important that we know, and something that is important for us that we recognize. We have to tune up our laughtership ability. So what's laughtership? Laughtership is the ability to find the punchline in the stress and frustration in your life and to turn it into positive energy. Because no matter what happens, there's always something there that you could take and you could twist, that you can make funny. C.W. Metcalf said, if you want to thrive in a world that is radically and relentlessly changing, you need fluidity and the flexibility of humor. Key and critical. But remember, humor's not just belly laughs and jokes. It's about that caring and compassion circle that's so important. So where in the world can we find humor? You find humor absolutely everywhere. You just have to start to look. This is where I regret that my slides aren't working. But you have to take about a 15-degree turn and look at things a little bit differently. And when you start to do that, you'll be amazed at what you actually see. Believe it or not, and I have a picture of this, I'm driving around Winnipeg one day, and I'm driving, and there's a transit bus. I come up behind the transit bus. You know, in the back of the transit bus, it's got the route numbers. This one was 3 X's. We have triple X rated buses in Winnipeg. I got friends from LA that are coming to visit here just to ride public transit. Grocery stores confuse the heck out of me. You know, you go to the grocery store, and I remember the Doritos had a contest on, right? This was big prizes, and ad. It said, no purchase necessary. Details in bag. They made me pay for it. Have you ever wondered why sour cream has a best before date? Why do they vacuum pack croutons for freshness? It's stale bread. I get upset with my wife sometimes, because she's very careful when she shops, wants to make sure I eat right. So I said, sweetie, if everything you buy is new, improved, and fat-free, how come I ain't? But we need to look at things a little bit differently. And when you start to look at things a little differently, you would be amazed at what you see. How many people know where Moxley's Rentals is on Osborne? Cool. Do you ever see that? Have you ever noticed the signs in the window? Moxley's going to be around forever. These guys will never go out of business. They got a sign in the window that says, "Waterbed supplies sold here. We sharpen knives and scissors." How can you go wrong? I was driving through the States with my daughter. We were in Montana, and we stopped at a Subway. It was part of a gas station. You know how they always have the stuff outside? It had sandwiches, salads, sodas, and right above the door, motor oil. I wonder if there's cholesterol in motor oil. If you drive in Arkansas, you go down highway number 7. You don't even have to make this up. If you drive down Highway 7, and 7 miles north of Pelsor, you can't make this up. There's a town called Booger Hollow. It's not on the map. And there's this great big billboard that says, "Slow, Booger Hollow, population 7, counting 1 coon dog." It's also the home of the world's only 2-story outhouse, which was closed because there was something wrong with the plumbing. But you got to start to look. There's a street, I remember we were in Hawaii. We were on the beautiful garden island of Kauai, in the beautiful garden state of Hawaii. And Kauai is one of the most beautiful places that I've ever been in my entire life. And we were at the crossroads of 2 streets, and I took a picture of the sign because it was Pee Street intersecting with Pee Falls, and isn't that obvious? I remember I was out working, and again, you just got to look at things differently. The humor is everywhere. Like, we live in the most absurd world that you could possibly imagine. I was working with a client in Mount Pleasant, Iowa, which was as flat as it is here, so I don't really get Mount Pleasant, but anyway, it's neither here nor there. And I would stop, and there was a truck stop called Buff's Iris City Plaza in Mount Pleasant, Iowa. I don't know. Anyway, so I got to know Buff really well over the years because I went there working with a client for 3 years. And Buff's had this buffet, this menu that I think is fine American dining, right? Burgers so juicy and greasy, you can't even imagine. The French fries, if they put them in a paper bag, you couldn't lift the bag because the grease would just eat through. So I got to know him really well. So over the 3 years, I would always ask him, "How's business going? How's business going?" He says, it's starting to slow down a little bit. I can't figure out. The guys drive by in their rigs. They go down about a half a mile. They go into the competition. I said, "Why do you think?" He said, "I don't know." I said, "What did you do? Change the menu and put a salad on it?" Thought that would get a laugh. Anyway, he said, "No, we're doing everything the same." I said, "Okay, cool." So I remember I figured, okay, fine. So when I went out to my car, I saw a sign. So I walked out and I stood in front, and here's Buff's Iris City Truck Plaza, and right in front was this big sign that said, "No trucks, please." If you're running a truck plaza, wouldn't you want trucks? So I went in and I talked to Buff. I said, "So what's the deal?" He said, "I don't want trucks in the front. I want them in the back." I said, "Why don't you put a sign that says trucks, more than ample parking in the back. Please park your rig and come in." He said, "I don't think it would make a difference." I sometimes wonder if he's still in business. I kind of doubt it. Oh, excuse me. So we've been talking about a lot of different things, and our time, unfortunately, is growing short. So to combat stress, I want you to take time to remember these thoughts. And if we do this, that'll go a long way in helping us combat stress. Always give people more than they expect. When you say I love you, mean it. When you say I'm sorry, look into the eyes of that other person. Never make fun of other people's dreams. Love deeply and with passion. You may get hurt, but it's the only way to live your life to the fullest. Don't offend and judge other people according to how their relatives behave. Speak slowly, but think quickly. When someone asks you a question that you don't want to answer, smile and ask them, why do you want to know? Remember that the greatest love and the greatest success involves the greatest risks. Remember the 3 R's. Respect yourself, respect others, and always take responsibility for all of your actions. Because that's really what it's all about. When you lose, and we all do from time to time, don't miss the lesson. Don't let a small misunderstanding ruin a great friendship. When you realize you've made a mistake, correct it immediately. Smile when you answer the phone. The caller will hear it in your voice. And instead of getting mad on the phone if you're talking to someone and you want to get your point across, stand up and talk. And you'll see that you have a whole different type of a voice without being aggressive. Always read between the lines. What didn't they say? What didn't they write? But what did they really mean? Remember that sometimes not getting what you want can be very fortunate. And how many times has that happened to us when we didn't get something we wanted and we realized that things happen for a reason, and that was the best reason. And always remember that you guys are truly the most amazing people in the world. Thank you.
I just wanted to thank everyone for coming today, and thank you again to Michael.
Oh, thank you very much. I appreciate that very much.
And
Thank you.